JB here. Hope everyone's doing us. November 18, 2024, 3:33. Really quick talk about the market. Some of the names I'm looking at, some of the names I traded today and go from there. Take a look at the S&P about up about a 1/4%. NASDAQ is up about 0.7%. Small caps are hanging in there. So nice little bounce. All the headlines. The markets bounced after their worst week in months. I mean, well, it's like 2 months ago, right? A month and a half ago. Same make it sound like last week was just this horrible week. I mean, the end of the week obviously was certainly not fun, but pullbacks happen, especially when we're at all-time highs. And we'll see how things play out the rest of the week. Tomorrow morning we get Walmart and Lowe's earnings. I think Home Depot already reported earlier. So I don't know how much that'll move things. And then we're getting into the, Black Fridays the following week. So I don't know how much retail sales are really going to matter much unless there's some guidance that or color that they can give around their holiday season. And then Wednesday is Nvidia, and it's all over the place, right? And it's almost like there's so much hype. It it's going to have to be like a monster beat and raise for it to, to go bonkers. I hope it's a monster beat and raise, and it just kind of holds the line. It's waiting now, on the S&P. It's pretty. It's funny, right? I was mentioning when it gets added to the Dow, it's waiting on the Dow it's like a third of IBM's, right? Or you look at some of the other names that are that are on the Dow, and Nvidia's like the bottom third of the weighting, or I don't even know how exactly where it fits in, but it won't move the Dow as much. Just kind of comical. But that'll be Wednesday, and then we have more earnings on Thursday's Target. Oh no, Wednesday morning's Target, and then there's not really much after that. So this will be kind of a week where we find out where everybody stands. Right? There's no major catalyst. There's no Fed. There's no not much in the way of data. I think there's some housing data, and that's about it. So you take a look at the SPY. We held that 585 in the morning. Had a little pull at the open, held that, reversed red to green, and have been trading not too bad ever since. And then some other, I would say, I always say the silver lining, but you take a look at the yields. The 10-year is slightly in the red. The US dollar is slightly weaker today. And then you take a look at the VIX, and the VIX is down almost 4%, which, right down near 15. So I wouldn't say back to the status quo, but certainly can you can paint the picture that, hey, this might be a week where some of the names that have ran last week and found pressure at the end of the week will resume their uptrend. So talk about some of those names in a second. Small caps need to hold the line here, down nearly 4.5% last week, only up 0.4%. Would love to see a bigger move here today, but maybe it's saving it for the rest of the week. And then the VIX. I already talked about the VIX. All right, so now individual names. So NetEase rallied at the open all the way up to $89, closed on my 90 strikes for over 100%. I held the rest because this typically what happens with NetEase, it's going to either gap up over that 90 handle tomorrow or it might gap down back to $85. I'm already riding free. The probability that I see for China markets being up and NetEase doing some continuation, I probably like 60-70%. So I would rather hold those strikes into tomorrow and then see how it goes. Still have plenty of time. They expire on Friday. Already riding free, so take some of the emotion out. But I really like the NetEase setup. And you look at the 200-day moving average, 92.30. That'd be a key spot. So I think it heads there this week. Call me crazy. So I'll hold for that. I also added some ROKU calls. I don't know who mentioned TGen or JWAG. Someone posted in the chat room earlier this morning in regards to ROKU. Got upgraded by Bard, however you pronounce it. They raised upgraded to outperform from neutral. I think they took their price target to 90. I mentioned it after its earnings. If you had told me their earnings before they reported, I would say, wow, the stock would be up. It was a beat and raise, great numbers, and it sold off. And I think there's still that cloud around ROKU that people think it's eventually, there's too many competitors. It doesn't have a moat. It's a commoditized business. There's all these bear narratives, which, I mean, a lot of them are possible, right? There's certainly, I mean, that's why the stock is volatile and risky, because there's the risk of it. Hey, it's at some point competition encroaches on them and they won't succeed, or the growth will slow down, and eventually the stock will keep tumbling. It'll become one of those snowball things. But on the flip side, if they continue to be the content provider of choice, monetize it, create their own content, and be able to continue to grow, I mean, to me, it should be trading much higher and become a cash cow, meaning profitable, throwing out free cash flow, whether it's going to be stock buybacks or what have you. That's probably further down the line. Not only that, it's possibly an M&A candidate, right? But anyway, so you saw the upgrade this morning. I was watching, it was 71 or so, or 72. I forget where it was. And I looked, I was like thinking of getting the weeklies, but Roku has this thing where it drives me nuts, right? So I didn't want to be in a spot where I didn't have time. So I went and got strikes out for next week. If I can get them out for 100% before the close here, they're getting close. Maybe I'll lock some in and ride the rest. But really like this one for a move back, at least to its earnings levels, maybe 78 this week. And then I have time, right? Time on the strikes. And a lot of times when I've traded Roku, and I mentioned it last time I traded the Roku calls pre-earnings, where I made there were a couple hundred, I think a couple are up 1,000%, but the premiums relative to historical levels are low. And when you see low premiums on a name that's had large outside moves out of nowhere on upgrades or catalysts, I mean, even if there is the stock is just sitting here, even just playing for that usually pays off. So that's kind of the thought process there on Roku. Also, there's the DELL strikes. You had the CEO, Michael Dell, come out with a tweet last night about being the first to ship NVIDIA's whatever processors in their cooled server racks or whatever. And then they also had some news this morning. It's just, I think this whole backdrop, especially with NVIDIA earnings coming Wednesday after the close, will offer some speculative moves on some of these names. And Dell's one of my favorites. I think it trades over 140 into the mid to high 140s this week, but a lot will have to do with NVIDIA. I was once it so typically what Dell does is gap in the morning, sell off, and then either it holds the sell off or it does reversal and starts hitting those highs again. That's what it did. I went and got the strikes. It was holding up pretty well into the afternoon, right at the noon hour, and then it's just been kind of melting a little. It's still up 3% for the day. Still like this for upside, so I'll continue to hold those calls. And then brings me to Square here, and I'm going to call it Square because every time I try to change and call it its real name, uh, I I forget and then I call it Square again. So I'm just going to call it Square. I had those 80 strikes last week. They paid off 50. I don't know, the last little tranche or whatever that I closed them out were 1,200% or so. Now I've been watching it. I was looking for a reentry, almost nibbled some last week, and then today you just watch, and it's like even with some of the other crypto names, it seems like those sometimes they had a little pullbacks, and Square still showed strength. So I think this might trade over $100, and then it might gain some steam, right? People are looking at some of these other names, and those are on tears too, but their premiums are elevated, so it's more difficult if you're trying to trade MSTR. I mean, good luck. You might as well just buy the common, right? Or Serious in the money strikes, or whatever you do. But there's still risk when you buy when you buy Serious in the money strikes. But when you look at Square, the premiums are still inexpensive relative to where it possibly could go. So that was kind of the thought process there. It's over $90 here. If I get a chance to lock a couple of my strikes in just to cover cost, I will and ride the rest. But don't be surprised if I add more strikes on strength. If it's near the highs, well, we've got 20 minutes to the close. I don't know if I add more today, but I could see it in the triple digits. And then once it breaks 100, maybe it's 120 in a couple days. Call me crazy. Sometimes you have to be crazy because if you're not thinking of those outcomes, you miss out on the big gains, right? If you think Square is going to $92, it's $90 here, you're going to close your calls out for a 10% gain, and then you're going to watch it go up. Your calls go up 1,000% or more, right? So that's kind of the thought process there. All right, so that's that. Just some quick on some other names. Take a look at Lemonade. It's going to close right near its 2-year highs here. It's 34.57. Would have loved to see 35 plus break and hold into the close. Still have a shot here, but once that happens, I'll look for some spec calls because to me, that's like the trigger point for the next level. If it breaks 35 and holds that, I think it squeezes up to $40 and beyond in the coming days. I was mentioning Target on the watch list this morning. It's up 2%, almost 3% today. I was looking for premium build for earnings and tried to ride some risk free into Wednesday morning. Maybe I'll just wait till they report. Retail's typically not a name that I trade too much. So, considering it's up 3% now, it's almost like the premium build is already somewhat baked in there. So if it's flat tomorrow, premium might come out. So I might pass on that, but don't be surprised if I add some Target. And then gold, and gold's up. Well, it was up nearly 2% before. Do I even have it on the stream here? It's up 1.67%, but it was down almost 5% yesterday. At some point, you had to think maybe there's going to be a bounce. Sometimes these bounces are a good spot for me to reload or add some more strikes. But I'll wait till tomorrow to see how things are playing out, and then I possibly finally might get some dust calls and J dust calls, GLL calls possibly, and then some more GLL puts. And I think that's it. Some other interesting news, right? I remember back when Bitcoin was going back when I don't know if you've been in the chat room long enough to remember Longfin, But that was one of the craziest stories of all time. But uh, back then it seemed like every company was coming out with some kind of news in Bitcoin or crypto. And it's funny, their DJT stock is up 13% spiking just because they may acquire some kind of crypto company. It's like, wow. That just shows you how hot it is right now. And at some point that'll change to something else. I mean, we've had the AI, we've had, 2 years ago was the metaverse, right? That was supposed to be Web 3.0. Now, what is it? Quantum computing. There's always going to be these buzzwords and stocks that go nuts, and some of them rightfully so. I mean, AI, of course, but we'll see what the next one is. Anyway, that's my rant. 17 minutes to the close. Let's have a great rest of the day. I'll be back on audio rock and roll.